I'm Colt Stevens from C. Stevens Gunworks. The following video you're going to see is an archive of my earlier work. Some of these earlier videos of mine have some great information that I really wanted to repost and preserve. So I hope you enjoy the content and I hope you learn something from this video. Today we're going to be talking about the basic operations of an AR-15 platform rifle or pistol. This video is inspired by a comment left by the G-Man, who asks, how do you basically operate an AR? How do you clean it? How often should you clean it? How should you maintain one of these? So we're going to start with the absolute basic guide. How do you use this gun? So we'll start off with, this is an AR-15 pistol. The only difference is the barrel length if you have a rifle or a pistol. Legally, there are other things we won't get in this video. This is just a functions video. This is not a legal video. So the basic operation, you have a magazine right here. There are normally cartridges in this magazine, in which I'll show you here. If you're playing with a gun during this video, do not use loaded cartridges. This is just for demonstration purposes only. This is a cartridge. This is a 5.56 cartridge. This is not a bullet. The bullet is just the pointy part. That is the projectile. So these magazines normally hold 30 rounds of 5.56. This is what they look like when they're loaded. It's got a little bit of weight to it. If you're at the range and you're ready to shoot one of these, for demonstration purposes, we'll use an empty one. You will put this into the magazine well, right here. Goes in just like this. You'll hear a snap. That means it's positively locked into there. At this point, you can't pull it out. So at that point, the charging handle is right here. You pull this back, you will have chambered around. Because this is empty, it locks right there. When it locks, you press this button right here. This is called the bolt release. That lets the bolt go forward. If there was a cartridge in that magazine, it would not be locked back. It would just be in this position. At this point, there is a cartridge in the chamber and you're ready to fire. It's important to note, you don't want to just play around with loading a cartridge because this does have a free floating firing pin. And there is a very, very small chance that when you let that bolt go forward, it will just go off. That's just inherent to the design. Some bolt carriers do not have that problem, but it's inherent to the design that that firing pin is free floating. It can be inertia driven into the back of the primer. You gotta be kind of doing some weird stuff to get it to do that, but just keep that in mind. Don't play around with loaded cartridges is what I'm trying to tell you. So at that point, you have a round in the chamber, you're ready to fire. So on this gun has a manual safety. There are only two positions on this one. This is not full auto. This is semi-automatic. So you pull the trigger one time, you get one cartridge, one round expended. It is not full auto. You don't pull the trigger down and get multiple. On this one, safe is the same direction as the barrel. So it's pointing this way. If you want it to be in fire, you want it pointing upwards. So you just turn this piece right here. And at that point it is on fire. You can pull the trigger and it will go off if you have a round in the chamber. At that point, every time you pull the trigger, you get one projectile exiting the barrel, one round fired. You don't get multiple, you just one. So if you have a 30 round magazine, you have 30 opportunities to pull that trigger. When you run out, it's going to look like this. You will have the bolt carrier back. You'll see the bolt carrier right there. There's an opening right there, and you can visually see that the gun is empty. There's nothing in the chamber. There's nothing in the magazine. The gun is empty. You've expended all 30 rounds or however many your magazine is. At that point, the magazine release is right here. So you press on that, your magazine drops out. And you see it's still locked open. If you want to put that bolt back forward, the bolt release is here again. You just press on that, it sends it forward. So this gun is completely empty. magazine is completely empty, at that point, there's no cartridges anywhere near it and it's safe. You visually inspected that it's empty. Don't assume that it's empty unless you visually look at the chamber and know that it's empty. So now that it's empty, you can pull the trigger. Make sure, I'm saying this for the third time, that there is no round in it if you want to play with the trigger. You can pull on the trigger. Notice it's in fire. It's vertical. Horizontal would be safe. Vertical is fire. You can pull on the trigger to get a sense for what it is. You'll hear that click. That is the firing pin being pushed through the bolt head, the bolt head, by the hammer, which is connected to the trigger. There's two separate pieces. So that's how you get ignition. It strikes the back of this cartridge, which is called the primer, and that causes a chain reaction that ignites the gases inside this, the powder inside this case, and propels that bullet, the copper part here, through the barrel, and that's what you're actually seeing it exit. The whole thing doesn't go with it. You still have the brass part up behind the case. So that is as simple as I can make it for you. You need to clean these pretty often. I'd recommend every time you go to the range, because these guns can misfire, they can jam the dirtier they get. We'll talk about this right now, why it does that. So the round, the projectile, just the copper part, the copper jacketed piece, the pointy part, goes through the barrel. It has a bunch of hot gases, that's the powder that's being burnt, pushing it through the barrel. So it goes this way, it gets to here. This is the gas block right here. This is one piece. And on a normal one, this is piston, but normally yours will look like this. It has a hollow tube that goes from here to here. There is a hole drilled in the barrel that allows the gas to go through this hollow tube, back this way, not through the barrel, through the hollow gas tube, back into the upper receiver. At this point, the gas will exit right here into the upper receiver. So at that, it will go, the gas tube goes through that hole right there on the end of the charging handle, and it will be locked against this piece right here, if you can see that. So the hollow tube goes all the way through, captures the gas right around here. This is piston driven, so it's not the best example, but it's two hollow tubes being compressed, and that compression will force that gas to accumulate, and it will push the bolt carrier back into the buffer spring, which is in the stock. This is the buffer spring right here, and here, right there, pushes it back into it, and it's got a spring that whenever there's enough force, will push it back. When that happens, the bolt carrier is stripping this magazine. It's going back, which is ejecting the brass out, and when it comes back, it's putting another one back in, and that's the semi-automatic portion. It's pulling out one motion, extracting, and then going back forward, pulling another one from the magazine, putting that into the chamber, the barrel. That is the semi-automatic function of this gun. It's pretty universal as far as that goes. All AR-15s, AR-10s, they work on that same principle. The recoil operated semi-automatic. Direct impingement is what they call it. So that's as simple as I can make the operation of the AR-15 for you. There is a lot that I've missed out on that's way more in-depth on this. That is the drop-dead simplest I can make this rifle to you. There's a lot going on. This is the pinnacle of firearms technology right here. The direct impingement system, gas-operated system, has been around since the 60s, and they've not found a better replacement for that in 60 years now, this being 2020. So it's a little bit complex if you're just getting into it, but it's really elegant in how simple it really is to work this whole system. It's as simple as they can make it, and they wanted it as simple and cost effective as can be. That's why the military still uses these things, and they've not gone with anything else. This one right here is a short stroke piston, which is a little bit different. Basically, instead of a hollow tube for a gas system, it's one solid anvil, and instead of compressing the gas in the bolt carrier, it just acts as an anvil and smashes into it and sends it flying back into the buffer spring. That's basically the difference between gas direct impingement and piston driven. But the downside to piston driven is it's proprietary, the parts are not interchangeable, and that's why the military doesn't like it. They're not readily repairable. Gas tubes are universal. You only have one or two gas tube types, and you can easily make those, easily replace them, easily fix the rifle in battlefield conditions. And once you have the parts to this rifle, and in fact we offer a build class, you can build a whole gun in an hour. I mean, there's not hand fit, it's universal, it's assembly line. There's not a whole lot to this gun at all. That's why it's super cheap, super effective. It just works. There's not a whole lot to it. So we'll go a little bit more advanced now. Let's go over the individual pieces that make this work. We'll start with the outside, which you actually see here. We'll start at the front end. This is a flash hider. This effectively controls your recoil impulse. You can get muzzle brakes that turn it horizontal instead of vertical rise. The downside of those is they're louder. They actually make more noise. That gas exits the muzzle in a controlled manner, but it's directed kind of back towards you, side to side, but kind of back towards you, instead of just exiting forward or going up or anything like that. This is a little bit of a compensator because you can only see the ports here are only 270 degrees, I'd say. The last 90 degrees down here is blocked off, so it's all it's compensating upward, which is directing your muzzle downward. It also serves as a flash hider because the flash is not up here, it's exiting right along in here on the sides. So that makes it a little bit harder to see it if you're in maybe wartime scenario. On the civilian side, you're not out there doing things like that, so you're not going to notice that. Underneath that is, this barrel is threaded, it has threads on it. Those are 1/2 by 28 threads. That's important to know because these muzzle brakes, compensators, flash suppressors, actual suppressors, all take that 1/2 by 28 thread. You can buy accessories for it that will work, but you need something that's compatible with 1/2 by 28 threads, and that will just screw on here. You also need to make sure that the actual hole that your projectile is going through is at least 223. They make them bigger than 223, 22 caliber, because you don't want it to accidentally hit the side of this muzzle device or the barrel or anything like that, and cause damage to it. Because oftentimes if it's going to hit something like that, especially in a suppressor, it's going to cause catastrophic damage to that part, and you're going to be without it. Pretty much, it's done. You got to send it back, get a new one. Hopefully your rifle's not trashed at that point. Underneath that, there's a crush washer. To be able to thread this muzzle device on there correctly, you have to crush that washer into the barrel to get it properly indexed. It's got to be turned the right way. You don't want it to be 270 degrees facing this way, because then you're compensating to the right, and you're going to be pushing it this way every time you fire. You don't want that. That's going to screw up your aim a lot. So don't do that. Underneath there, what it's actually attached to, the most important part of this gun is the barrel. You can see the barrel sticking out right there. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on there, but there's writing on there. This one says .223 Wild 18 USA. So let's break that down really quick. So 223 Wild. That's one of the 3 chamberings that you can get. That's 223 Remington, 5.56 NATO, and 223 Wild. 223 Remington, it's the oldest one. It's a lower pressure barrel. So you can only shoot 223 Remington out of a 223 Remington barrel. If your barrel is stamped 5.56 NATO, you can shoot both 5.56 NATO cartridges as well as 223 Remington. So 223 Wild is a 223 Remington barrel that can also shoot 5.56. So in 5.56 barrels, the best thing you can do is shoot 5.56 through it, but you can also shoot 223. In 223 Wild, you can shoot 223 Remington optimally, but you can also shoot 5.56 through it. In 223 Remington, you cannot shoot anything other than 223 Remington in that barrel. That is a very important distinction, and that can blow up your rifle if you don't follow that direction. If you have, most riflers are going to be 5.56 anyway. And there's not a whole lot of difference in those chamberings. That's the chamber of the barrel, actual cut dimensions. What that cartridge is actually sitting in, that's the chamber. That's what's printed on that barrel. The 223 Wild is the newest thing. It's the highest end. If you find one, that's the best one to get, basically. But of course 5.56, if you're only shooting 5.56, you should get a 5.56 barrel. There's a lot of debate about whether shooting 5.56 through a 223 Wild barrel is damaging to it. There's not a lot of evidence to say that it is. The short answer is you can shoot both through 223 Wild, you can shoot both through 5.56. You cannot shoot anything but 223 Remington in a 223 Remington barrel. So moving past that, so this is 1/8 twist. So twist rate. This is a very advanced concept, so we'll only briefly talk about it here. This is gonna probably do its own dedicated video. And also, if you take our armorer's course for AR-15 platform, we talk a lot about this. This has to do with bullet stabilization. So if we have this cartridge right here, the projectile right here, the copper plated part, is 55 grains is the weight. Grains is a measurement of weight. So if you have a 55 grain projectile, you need a certain number, you need a certain rate of twist in the barrel. So barrels are rifled, if you know that. That's a concept that came in the middle 1800s. Back then they were smoothbore, so they discovered that if you put cut rifling, there's a twist rate in that barrel that increases the accuracy by imparting spin on that projectile. So it twists and it retains velocity at longer distance. And it's also more accurate, it's flat because it has that twist. So for certain weights of projectile, you need a certain rate of twist, how quickly that twist is in that barrel. So this means if it's 1/8, you have one complete twist every 8 inches. This is a 10.5 inch barrel, so it just has a little bit over one complete twist in this barrel. For 55 grains, projectile. You need a 1.9 twist rate barrel. If you're shooting a 62 grain, you need a 1.8 twist barrel. If you are shooting anything over 62 grain, starting about 68 grains, I would say, you need a 1.7 twist barrel. If you have a 1.7 twist rate barrel, you can still shoot everything below it and be properly stabilized. In Vietnam, they had a 1.12 twist rate barrel. There's a reason you don't see those anymore. A 1.12 twist rate barrel is not effective for a 55 grain projectile. And so whenever they would fire this 55 grain projectile, it's not very accurate. It doesn't have enough spin to stabilize. So you can shoot that rifle all day long, but you don't know where that projectile is going to land. So that was the problem they ran into. They didn't do enough testing on that projectile to figure out, well, how much spin do we need for this projectile? So whenever they fixed that problem, they had different twist rate barrels. The 1.9 twist is what they ended up going with. And that was enough to properly stabilize a 55 grain projectile, and it actually worked out for them. If you have a 1.12 twist rate, there's not enough spin on that projectile to properly stabilize it in flight over any range. Sure, 10 foot might be okay, but if you get past 50 yards, it's not going to be very good at all. It's going to be terrible for you. So moving on, past the barrel, we have the gas block. In the first part of the video, we talked about why that's important. There's a hole drilled in the barrel. The gas exits that, goes through the gas block, goes through the hollow tube back into the upper receiver to do the semi-automatic portion of this this firearm, the principle of operation. On normal guns, you'll see a sight block that's one part of it. The gas block is one piece. It's an A2 front sight gas block. It's all one piece. In there, you have a sight post right there. That's what you're looking at when you look through the rear sight. You're trying to line those two up, and that's how you accomplish aiming. There's a little bit of adjustment you can do to that front sight post, but we're not going to talk about that. It's mostly just elevation adjustment. They make a little tool you can use. So on this one, this is a 10.5 inch barrel, and this is a carbine length barrel. So we're talking about this distance to this distance is carbine length. That's the same length you see on a 16 inch barrel. You have a circular end cap, which retains this carbine length handguard right here. That's the part you're gripping like this. These are, you can remove these, you can put drop-in things, drop-in handguards. Those are really useful if you want to attach lasers, lights, grips, things like that. That's what you would put here if you have a different handguard. This basic one is not very conducive to attachments. You have to get something else. But the important part is it's carbine length. That's what you need if you're trying to replace it. That's held in place right here by this delta ring. It's got two halves that kind of just sit in between that delta ring, and that's what snaps it in right here, and it's retained by this end cap right there. And this is spring loaded. You can push this back. It's got a little, it's really stiff. They make a tool that will pull that out, and that makes it a lot easier. But that handguard is removed. So next you have the rear sight. Not all of them have this. This is just the standard look, the carry handle look. Underneath here, this is a flat top, and I'll show you what it looks like with this off. So that comes right off, and then you have a flat top Picatinny rail. You can put scopes, you can put red dots, you can put whatever you want on there because it's Picatinny, it's universal. Anything that will fit on a Picatinny rail will go right there. This one is detachable, so it just kind of sits on there. It's got these oversized knobs right here that you just twist, and you're just locking it into this Picatinny rail. And it's important to get those really well locked down because you don't want it to come off while you're shooting it, because it does have some recoil in this cartridge that kind of rocks the whole gun, and that can twist these knobs off when you don't want it to pull off. There's a lot of adjustment right here that you can do to this AT rear sight. It's set up for 100 yard zero right this minute, so I'm not going to play with that. But you have two apertures right there. You have a peep sight, which is really narrow. You have an open aperture sight that's a little bit bigger that you can see. I can only do aperture, I can't do peep sight. I can't see anything with that, so I just leave it on the open aperture sight. There's two different ones, depending on your personal preference. There's also windage and elevation adjustment knobs right here. You just twist those and you get different, you're moving that aperture around. And all of your adjustment back here is on the rear sight. You can limitedly adjust the front sight, but most of your adjustment comes back here. Now if you have a red dot, that depends on what you have, but that will also have adjustment on the optic itself if you're trying to line that up with the front sight. Sometimes it's the right height, sometimes it's not. If it is the right height, they call that co-witnessing. If it's not the right height, it's either above or below. If it's below, I'd just throw that out. I wouldn't do that. If it's above, that's okay. You can still see what you're trying to get. But if it's below, you can't see anything, so I would just take that off that gun because that's serving no purpose for you. So past that, we have the upper receiver, this one piece right here. We have the lower receiver. When we open this up, which I'll show you this now, the takedown for when you want to pull the upper and the lower apart is right here. You push that in. You can use a cartridge right here. You use the projectile. You push on, there's like a little spot right here that is just the perfect size for the pointy part, the projectile. Just press that in all the way. Pull this out right here. It opens up. This is the inside of the gun. There's a lot going on in here. The upper receiver is this half. The lower receiver is this half right here. This is one half, this is the other half. Right here you have the charging handle and you have the bolt carrier right here. We'll go ahead and take this out. This is the bolt carrier right here. This is the charging handle. This is the upper receiver with no bolt carrier charging handle. So inside here, you got the dust cover right there that just protects stuff from entering it whenever it's in storage. You can see all the way, if you look through, that barrel is hollow, you can see all the way through, that's where the projectiles go. The last thing on the upper receiver we got here, this is the forward assist. If you'll notice on this bolt carrier, you have these ribs right here. When this is in there, we'll put all this back in here so we can demonstrate this. When you're putting it back together, there's a little notch. You will only allow it to go up into the receiver, the upper receiver in one spot. So right here, you'll notice when I push on this, you see the back of the bolt carrier right here is getting pushed in with the forward assist. When you have low quality ammunition, and especially back then, they're using the best stuff they could get, but you're completing that seal by pressing on that forward assist. So when this is pushed forward, you're ramming that cartridge into the chamber and making sure you have the proper lock on that from the bolt face to the chamber. If it's not fully locked, you're not getting the full amount of pressure and you're losing velocity, and you can also have bad things happen to your barrel. You can have critical failures at that point. You can have an explosion, you can have an out of battery detonation, bad stuff. You don't want any of that to happen. So the forward assist, it's really not that useful today, but they still have them on there because the military did that, and sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. You shoot a lot of reloads, that's where it comes in handy. But my advice is not to do that. I wouldn't shoot reloads nowadays because you can blow up your whole gun doing that. Short answer is don't do that. Other than that, we'll move on to the lower half now. So I talked about the safety and the operations towards the beginning. You can actually see it's turning right here. You can get ambidextrous safeties. This one is not. This is just regular sided. This is moving a piece on the inside that's allowing the trigger to be pulled, which when the safety's on, there's no movement there. But when the safety is off, the trigger is active, you can pull on it. You see it smacks the hammer up, and that's what would hit the firing pin, which is right there inside the bolt carrier. And when that firing pin goes forward, it strikes the back of the cartridge, which is the primer, ignites the powder inside the brass case, and projects that projectile through the barrel, propels it. You can reset the trigger just like the hammer like that. That's the same thing as racking the bolt carrier with the charging handle. That's just pushing this back down. This little red piece we're not really going to talk about. That's an AccuWedge that increases the pressure between the upper and the lower. That's kind of an accuracy tool, but we're not going to talk about that today. You don't see that. That's just something you put in there that increases the accuracy. We won't get into that a whole lot. Back here we have the buffer spring and buffer itself, which is located inside the buffer tube. So this is what actually the bolt carrier is resisting against. Spring loaded here. You can see it there. The buffer right there is a weighted buffer and a buffer spring. I'll go ahead and put this back in here. That's what controls how much weight and recoil impulse you feel. You can get heavier, you can get lighter. If you get too light or you get too heavy, it won't cycle the gun. Getting a little bit more advanced, you want about a 3 o'clock ejection angle, and you can add more or less weight to play with that ejection angle in the upper receiver. When the cases are ejected, you can note the direction relative to the way you're facing, and you want 3 o'clock is what you're hoping to achieve. When you get into higher end guns like LWRC, things like that, you'll notice that they have a perfect 3 o'clock ejection angle because they are perfectly tuned. That's why it kind of helps to get a really good high-end gun. If you just buy something off the shelf, I won't name any names, but I'm thinking of a bunch of them right now. They're not tuned at all. They're as cheap as they can make them and still be functional, but they're just sloppily made. They're not perfectly tuned or anything like that. You can have these guns tuned. We would offer that service if you want to get a 3 o'clock ejection angle. And the reason that it's 3 o'clock is the reason that we tell you 3 o'clock is the optimal is because if it's too far forward or it's too far back, you're either having more or less recoil from the semiotic firing of the gun. The recoil impulse is coming back into your shoulder, and if you have too much or too little, you're either getting too much recoil or too little. If you have too little, you may have jamming. You may not have proper feeding from the magazine because that bolt carrier is not coming all the way back. If you have too much gas, more recoil than you need. It's just it's more than sufficient to pull it back. In extreme cases, it'll blow out the back end of the buffer tube because the spring can't handle that much force being enacted upon it. So 3 o'clock in short is what you want. If your gun is not that way, you can get parts that will make it 3 o'clock the perfect ejection angle. So past that, we have the grip and the stock or pistol brace. In this case, it's a pistol brace. Pistol braces are a legal item. You must have a pistol brace if you have less than a 16-inch barrel. This one is adjustable. It's got a notch right there you can push in and slide it up or down. And right here you'll see the Kessel nut. That's how this buffer tube is retained on the upper receiver. The upper receiver is, or the lower receiver is threaded, and that's what the buffer tube threads onto, and then you lock the Kessel nut on it to make sure this doesn't come off. So that is absolutely everything there is to know about the AR-15. Short of going to an armor, of course. Let's talk about cleaning real quick. So you should clean it as often as you can, every time you go to the range. You don't have to like break it down after every shot. That's too much. But every time you go to the range, I wouldn't let it go past 1,000 rounds. If you're shooting more than 1,000 rounds at the range, right now, that's terrible. You're wasting so much money by shooting that many rounds right now. But 1,000 rounds is where you have problems with the AR, especially in regular direct impingement. So we talked about direct impingement and short stroke piston. Direct impingement, there's gas entering the upper. Short stroke piston, there's not gas entering the upper. When direct impingement, which is by and large what you'll have in the U.S. civilian AR-15s, that gas is, when it's compressed, it's got a large volume of gas that's just getting stacked and stacked and stacked until it explodes violently enough to send it into the buffer tube to actuate the bolt. At that point, that residue is still in the upper receiver and it's just spread out. It's pushed out of the way by the bolt carrier, but it's still there. That carbon accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, and eventually you can't get a lock. That bolt carrier doesn't interface with the chamber very well. You can start to have problems. You may not have a round strip from the magazine correctly. You may not have proper breech lock. You may not have this bolt face interact with the chamber. Jamming, things getting stuck. You can, to some degree, you can just spray oil in it and it will probably keep going, but at some point you really need to get in there and dig all that stuff out. So inside the receiver, the upper receiver, take the bolt carrier out, take the charging handle out. There is a little groove in here that the charging handle sits in. You want to get right up in there and wipe that with something like this here. This is Hilco Lube. We use this. This is made in Georgia. We sell this product. It's basically CLP. That's what you need. These are wipes. You can see it right there. These are pre-lubricated. They have the oil on them. That's what you need. That oil is what's going to take up that carbon, that powder residue, and put it on the wipe. And it also leaves behind a lubricant that helps things run. AR-15s are really picky about lubricant, and you need to spray them down wet all the time to ensure everything's properly running. Right now, because I've played with this one a bunch, I'm going to have to spray it before I shoot it, because just me handling it has taken off all the lubricant, and it's going to need it, and it's not going to function until I spray it down. These guns must be run wet. I just said that, but you need to know they must be run wet. One of the most common things is people bringing these guns in to the shop and says, "Oh, well, I can't get it to run. Why is it not shooting? Did you sell me a defective gun?" And our question is, did you spray it down with oil? Because if you didn't, that's going to be a major problem. Spray it down before you shoot. That is the number one problem you will have with these guns. If you spray it down and you've cleaned it and there's still a problem, that's a cause for concern. But you just need to clean out this channel right here, spray everything with oil, and the last thing you need to do to clean it is run, which on these, you can cut these patches down, run a ramrod through the barrel, starting right here, or back here, whichever you prefer. Just through the barrel with that oil on it, that patch, and that will clean out the inside of the barrel. That's not super important because every time you fire it, it's going to kind of push all those gases out, but that will preserve the lifetime of your barrel if you do that every now and then, 1,000 rounds or so. Depending on the ammo you use, if you're shooting really low quality stuff, or it's maybe 5,000 rounds through it, you might want to apply some kind of bore solvent to it, because over time you'll get these copper jackets will kind of like leave shavings inside the rifling, and that can mess up your bullet stabilization if things are not there's not enough depth to those grooves to allow that spin to be imparted. At that point, you want to get something to dissolve that copper and let it flow out the front. And you just kind of drip that solvent in there and it will work its way through and get all those shavings out. That copper fouling is the technical term for that. That's what accumulates over a long period of time. You don't need to do that every time you go to the range. That's just an extreme overtime thing. It's important to know that these barrels only last about 15,000 rounds, so you should only do that like 3 times in the course of this barrel's life. But that's pretty extreme use. I mean, like I said, today ammo is so expensive I don't really see shooting 5,000 rounds, but in combat scenarios, military applications, things like that, 5,000 rounds, you need to put some bore solvent on there, get rid of that copper fouling. Other than that, every 1,000 rounds or so, clean out the upper receiver, put oil all over it, just wipe the whole thing down. The barrel and the bolt carrier, to a lesser extent the magazine, maybe the fire control, those parts can all rust. So it's good to leave a layer of oil or lubricant on those. Even if you have a stainless steel barrel, I would still wipe it down because I have seen stainless steel rust. I don't know if it's just what they use for barrels in this industry that's a different grade of stainless steel, but it's still rust. For all the sales counter talk that you'll hear about, oh, we'll get a stainless steel barrel because it will never rust. It will. If it has iron in it, it will rust. So the longer you let that rust sit on that barrel, the more it's going to eat into it. And if you get pitting on that barrel, that's going to affect barrel harmonics for one, which we're not going to talk about because that's a way too complex topic for this video. But it can also eat into that barrel, and if it goes unchecked long enough, it will eat into the barrel and cause structural damage. So you may be firing it one day and you might just have a barrel explosion because that pitted rust has went too far. You definitely don't want that because of improper maintenance. That's something you could have prevented if you just oiled it down. Just wipe the whole thing down with oil. Spray the whole thing spray the bolt carrier with oil when you're shooting it. But leave a thin film of oil all over the whole thing. That's to preserve it. If you're just handling it like this, because I will spray it down later, but if you're just handling it like this, you don't have to have oil on it, but do not leave it just sitting there for days, months, years without putting some kind of protective coating on it, because it will rust. It is metal, especially the barrel. That part is prone to rust. And this is a carbon steel barrel, so it's going to rust a lot quicker than the stainless steel barrels, even though I said that they're less prone to rust. they still will rust. Carbon steel will rust a lot quicker than the stainless steel that you find in barrels that are made for ARs. Oil, oil, oil. Just get this stuff right here. Just use it. Doesn't do you any good if it's still in the bucket. It has to be on your gun. So other than that, that's the maintenance, that's the operations, that's the individual parts. That's basically everything you need to know about an AR-15. That is the complete guide. If you have questions, please leave a comment. I will be happy to answer them. I will personally answer your comment if you leave one. I try my best to answer every comment I have on this channel. So definitely do not hesitate to leave me a comment. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And I believe that's everything I have for y'all today. I hope this was informative. I've tried my best to keep this as condensed down, as thorough and intensive without being too complicated. This is intended as a new owner's guide to an AR. But there's just so much that you can get into, and there's, especially when you get into advanced parts of this hobby, there's so much you can do to it. I mean, this is by no means a factory gun. This is a completely custom piston gun, pistol, customized as can be. Yours is probably not going to look like this when you buy it off the shelf. Another thing too is, and I meant to address this in the beginning of the video, is so many weird things are being sold right now that you buy a gun and you have no clue what you're going to have, what you're going to end up with. And you go in there expecting to buy an AR, but what are you actually getting? You're getting whatever they have on the shelf at that point. But you need to be able to make the best of what you have with what you bought. Now that being said, if you buy a 1.9 twist rate barrel, which most like DPMS's, some custom ones, I think Anderson does it at 1.9 twist. If you have a 1.9 twist and you want to shoot 62 grain, 70 something grain, to some extent you can change that barrel. You'll have to get a different barrel installed to properly utilize those cartridges. You can still shoot it. It's not ideal. I would stick to the 55 grain just like this. If you're shooting green tip, that's a 62 grain. Not ideal for a 1.9 twist rate barrel. 62 grain is ideal for a 1.8 twist. And that's why you see high-end guns. The Springfield Saint uses a 1.8 twist rate barrel. I don't know if LWRC is right off. I think they're either 1.8 or 1.7. Most like Palmetto State Armories, those are a 1.7 twist rate barrel. That's good. It's okay to have too much stabilization, but it's not okay to have too little. And it's really a shame that a lot of companies give you a 1.9 twist rate barrel, because they're pretty much sabotaging you from the get-go. 55 grain is about the only thing you should use with a 1.9 twist rate barrel. You got anything heavier than that, you need a new barrel, especially 62 grain MA55s. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and please subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.